Thank you very much, Valery. Good day, dear colleagues and friends. Now I need a screen. Oh, thank you. Hmm. Okay. Greeting from Ukraine. Thank you very much for the invitation to this conference. To be a participant is both a strange and exciting experience for me. It is strange because I don't speak Yiddish. The spoken language of my ancestors disappeared from my family 8 years ago with the death of the last member of the older generation. It is exciting because the sphere of my interest, Jewish art, lived and developed within this linguistic and cultural space. My presentation is difficult to classify as academic. Rather, it reflects various experiences, family memories, trips to different countries, and my own research, where Yiddish, vividly or invisibly, united this entire space of Yiddishland into a single continuum. Uh, 1 second. This is my personal story of contemplating a world filled with Yiddish, from which one's only traces and memories remain today. A Russian rocket that struck my home in Kharkiv last November hit the very heart of my childhood memories from the late 1970s to the 1980s, in which Mamelotion was heard. Four Jewish families lived in our communal hallway, and Jewish neighbors used to come to my grandmother Fira to chat about life. I loved to listen to their gossip and Bobby Macy's, comfortably settled on the couch. Skirting sensitive topics for a child's ear, my grandmother would instantly switch to Yiddish, leaving specific words and idioms embedded in my memory. Many years later, these warm memories accompanied my brother and later my grandchildren to the homeland of my relatives in Kamenets-Podilsky, where Yiddish only remains on signs and the site of the murder of Jews by the Nazis. These obelisks and memorials were erected during the Soviet times when the authorities forbade mentioned Jews as victims, as required the use of impersonal formulations like placeful Soviet citizens and so on. A single photograph of my grandfather and grandmother remains in the family. They gave this print to their children as a memento a year before their execution. With my grandmother's passing, the vast wood of former Ukrainian Yiddishland became desolate and silent. I felt that it would no longer send to me signals from the past. This world spoke to me again in the early 2010s in New York, where I observed numerous Jewish inscriptions and signs. There were the years when I began to travel to the United States frequently, where I researched the murals of old synagogues of Jewish immigrants from Eastern Europe. These searches led me to the Lower East Side, where at the turn of the 19th and 20th centuries, waves of Jewish immigration from all over Eastern Europe converged. 1910 marked the demographic peak of the Lower East Side, where over 500,000 Jews resided. In the second half of the 20th century, as American Jewry strengthened, the Lower East Side began to be sacralized in Jewish memories. This memory is expressed today in the mural Our Strength is Our Heritage is Our Life, created in 1922 on the wall of one of the houses in the Lower East Side. Among numerous images inspired by Jewish immigration, prayers, traditions, the Holocaust, and hard work, the author employs inscriptions in Yiddish as a language of Eastern European Jewry. Jewish congregations' names remain markers on the gates and facades of synagogues, commemorating the names of shtetls and paying tribute to specific communities. In 1939, over 200 Jewish communities and synagogues founded by immigrants from Poland, Ukraine, and Belarus were recorded in the Lower East Side. Many of them had visual references to the communities where the congregants came from. The Stenchen Street Synagogue, founded by immigrants from the state of Berezhany, now in Ukraine, has on in its facade the reminiscences of Eastern European synagogues, such as the Great Synagogue in Berezhany from 1918. The architect hints to the arched belts of fortress synagogues from the past, emphasizing that the new American life of the Jews is built on the foundation of old heritage. One of the important signs of this identity is a carved inscription on the pediment of the building, where the name of the synagogue is spelled out in Yiddish. Walking through this neighborhood, one can encounter many similar inscriptions on the facades of synagogues belonging to Jewish communities from Mezherich, Belostok, Pidhaitzi, etc. The carved inscription on the facade of the Jewish congregation of immigrants from the city of Proskuri retains the old Yiddish name of the city, which was renamed to Khmelnytsky in 1954. However, in Jewish history, it is the old name that is associated with the tragic Proskuri pogrom of 1919, during which more than 1,500 people were killed by Ukrainian Cossacks in a single day. Old photographs of this area depict a bustling neighborhood where Yiddish inscriptions were part of the visual urban space. Today, these streets look different, and traces of the past must be searched for. Back to Europe. I expected the Yiddish had wider presence in the urban spaces where large Jewish population used to live. However, these traces are hidden under the plaster or repainted and renewed buildings. The Soviet regimes, the Holocaust, and the post-war 20th century have erased these traces. Nevertheless, all Yiddish inscriptions, often referred to as ghost signs, could still be found in the streets of Lviv. They primarily date to the late 19th, early 20th centuries, when signs were painted by artisans directly on the walls of buildings, informing customers about the products, goods, and company names. Most inscriptions were written in Polish and Yiddish, though there were ones in German and Ukraine, languages spoken in pre-war Galicia. During Soviet times, these inscriptions were either plastered over or painted over for two reasons: the imposition of the Russian language and the expropriation of private businesses. This image depicts an advertisement for a hat shop featuring illustrations of fashionable men's hats. However, this mural was recently destroyed. The best preserved inscriptions in Lviv are found on the building of a former dairy shop. The list of products sold is written in separate columns in Yiddish, German, and Polish. Similar inscriptions in small quantities were found in Chernivtsi, the former capital of Austrian Bukovina. Here there was its own linguistic context, dominated by German, Romanian, and Yiddish. We know the name of the craftsman who made signboards in Chernivtsi, as well as synagogue murals. Isaac Issachar Isakovich, according to his advertisement in the German language Chernivtsi morning newspaper, Chernovitz Morgenblatt, from 1924, was a well-known sign maker with an excellent reputation. The author of this note reported that he was willing to repaint old signs with house numbers according to newly approved models for a fee of 50 lei each. This in the newspaper. In the Chernivtsi Museum of History and Culture of Bukovina Jews, a rare example of his work is on display, a painted signboard in oil on metal. This advertisement features a large fish, a bottle of wine, and a glass, accompanied by good wishes for for the month of Adar, associated with the Purim festival. Isaacovich signed his name here as well as on the murals of the small hall of the Great Synagogue in Chernivtsi. Interestingly, unlike Hebrew, which was used in synagogue paintings as part of the program decoration, masters often preferred to sign their names as well as the names of benefactors in Yiddish. This emphasized the everyday foundation of the language, which Jews themselves referred to as jargon. Moving east into the territory of the Russian Empire in the Pale of Settlement, this linguistic landscape changed. The sideboards contained vibrant advertisements for goods and Jewish names of traders and producers, and were in Russian. I was unable to find references to a law prohibiting signs in Yiddish in the Pale of Settlement. This is confirmed by postcards and photographs from the pre-revolutionary and interwar periods depicting shtetls, Jewish streets, houses, and stores. On postcards from the early 20th century in Berdichev, Zhmerenko, Mogiliv, Nemiriv, and others, the signboards for taverns, showmakers' shops, hatmakers' shops, and building material stores featured advertisements, but inscriptions in Yiddish were absent. We will same phenomenon in the photo collection of art historian Danilo Sherbakivsky from the same period, brought from many shtetls in the Kiev region and Volhynia. Even in photographs of the Jewish quarter of Jerusalimka in Vinnytsia, where only Jews lived, the shuttered displayed the advertisements for a showmaker in Russian. Such disregard for Yiddish raises questions about its perceived legitimacy in the urban landscape of pre-revolutionary Russia. There were exceptions to this rule. For example, the signboards of the Epstein Hotel in Kharkiv that include the word kosher were in Yiddish. This was a clever way of attracting Jew clientele by appealing to Jews who absorbed tradition. I described this building in my guidebook, Jewish Kharkiv. Incidentally, this historical building was destroyed by a Russian missile in 2022 at the onset of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Absence of Yiddish in urban spaces also can be absorbed in artistic sources. For example, in the early 1910s, the famous researcher and artist Georgy Lukomsky created a series of four generalized images of cities in the Russian Empire: metropolitan city, county city, provincial town, and small town. In small town, he deliberately highlighted the Jewish portrait of the shtetl, depicting a marketplace with a synagogue in Dubna and typical wooden buildings in the background. However, also signboards featured inscriptions in Russian. Signboards played an important role in works of Jewish artists from the 1920s and 1930s who focused on the theme of shtetl life. For instance, Salmon Yudovin, born in Belarus and well-traveled in the shtetls of Podole and Volhynia, employed similar motifs when portraying traditional shtetls in his graphics. In many of his works, he incorporated the image of a boot on a high stick as a distinctive marker of a Jewish quarter. He used this image to emphasize the chasm between two worlds, the Jewish and the Christian. Additionally, he utilized various signboards to delineate the old traditional Jewish world from the new proletarian and revolutionary Jewish world. A similar motif of a boot signboard was often used in the works of Kharkiv artists Massive Radkin, and Bar-Ilan. In the illustrations for a book of stories by Moicher Sforim, Fradkin's microcosm of shtetl life featured a signboard with a boot. In a collaborative work, the Almanach of the Ukrainian Association of Jewish Proletarian Poets, published in Yiddish in 1929, this same image was included to emphasize the contrast between the old and the new proletarian worlds. In another illustration, the artist cleverly placed the initials on a signboard perched along the road, linking the author's signature with the maker of a Jewish quarter on the outskirts of the shtetl. Having disappeared from old signboards, Yiddish re-emerged in the urban space during the early Soviet era. Numerous street demonstrations in the early years of Soviet rule featured banners in Yiddish, which became an integral part of the new social and cultural life of Jews. During the anti-religion campaign that was unleashed a few years later, Yiddish signboards were relocated to the facades of many former synagogues, which had been converted into Jewish proletarian clubs. Similar signs appeared on Jewish schools, theaters, and museums, reminding urban dwellers of the Jewish presence, now as part of a new community. A photograph from 1933 depicting a nationalized synagogue in Kharkiv with numerous posters reveals the cultural cross-section of that time. A female janitor in a white kerchief at the open entrance looks directly at the camera. She has launched her broom against a large poster board beside the entrance, as if inviting us to enter what is now the Jewish club, with a fabric bearing and inscriptions in Yiddish hanging above. Among the numerous theatrical posters on the left, there is only one poster in Yiddish that may be related to performances of the State Jewish Theater opened in Kharkiv in 1925. This was the final period of Yiddish presence in the Soviet urban space. It began to wane in the early 1930s when the authorities started to suppress national life and replace it with a focus on social class identity. The Holocaust would follow years later. It was during these years that my grandmother Fira, together with her husband Grigory, arrived in Kharkiv from Kamensk-Podilsky in search of a better life. Thank you very much.